boat services. In the unlikely event that we have an emergency, just remain calm and please listen to clear instructions from the well-trained crew. Toilets are located down below at the back. Smoking is permitted on the top deck towards the back of the vessel. Now, for those of you that have been on board, you know we're doing a live commentary as we've made our way down river. Now, I am going to attempt to continue the commentary all the way round to Greenwich. Just be aware though, folks, some of the places of interest do get a little bit far and few between. May feel like there's not a lot being said at some points, that's basically because there's really not that much to talk about. But I will do my best to make it as entertaining as I possibly can. But now that we've come from Tower Bridge, sort of marks the point where we leave the City of London, and we're now into what is considered to be the old working port of London. Pretty much what we're going to be looking at right now are all converted warehouses that have been turned into luxurious, unaffordable housing. But they have kept a lot of the old features on the outsides, like the names at the top of the warehouses, and the cranes that was used to move the cargo from the barges to the warehouse. Quite ironic really, considering about 50 years ago nobody knew what to do with all these warehouses. They're all completely abandoned, pretty much only used by film studios and TV studios to film things like The Bill and other ITV shows that you see on TV. But nowadays it's been turned into luxury, unaffordable housing. Your average price is going to be at least $500,000, and that is a bare minimum price if you want to live around having a nice riverside view. But we do actually have some modern architecture scattered around all these old warehouses. These three glass buildings coming on our left. Now they have actually been designed by an architect, and they do actually have some inspiration behind them. There is actually meant to be something inspiring those buildings. Now before I tell you what it is, see if you can guess what it might be. It is a little bit cruel for me to expect anybody to get it correct. Nobody ever does. These are in fact meant to resemble free French soldiers marching. Yeah. I don't know what the architect was on. I think the slanted roof is meant to be a beret. The antennae on top could be the bayonets on the end of their gun. But we just have to use our imagination, ladies and gentlemen. A bit more of this construction on our right hand side. You may have noticed several places like this on our journey today. We'll see another area like this a little bit further downriver, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it when we go by. Now before we do that, I just want to mention about Oliver's Wharf coming up on our left hand side. You can see the word Oliver's Wharf just at the top of the warehouse. Now this was one of the very, very first warehouses that was converted into luxury apartments. Now the entire building, when it was first built as a warehouse, it only cost a little over $300,000 to build the entire thing. These days, to own just one single flat in Oliver's Wharf, last time I looked, there was one going for about $1.2 million. named after the ship that took the pilgrims across to America to celebrate the first Thanksgiving. Actually started its journey just over here outside of Royal, and actually came back to London after it went to America. It came back here and it was broken down. Part of the wood that was used to make the original Mayflower ship can still be found inside of that pub, and in the church just behind it was used to make the pews. Royal Station is the closest if anyone wishes to go and have a look and a drink. We're now going by a few more of the old warehouses. Got New Crane Wharf just on our left. Metropolitan Wharf will be coming up very shortly. Now the word wharf, this is actually an acronym, and it stands for Warehouse at River Front. If anyone knew that? Anybody at all? No? No one else here? Well, that's good to know because I just made it all up. It is actually an old Anglo-Saxon word that means raise, keep or dog. But well done for being honest, everybody. Now over to our left-hand side again, we're going to see another riverside pub. That white building with the large willow tree just outside it. This one is called the Prospect of Wakefield. And that actually is the oldest riverside pub still here in London today. It actually had the nickname the Devil's Tavern back when this was a working area, and we used to get some very unsavoury clientele drinking in that pub. We used to get pirates, thieves, murderers, ladies of the night. Now I've mentioned how much the area has changed, how much money it's going to cost you to live around here. Sadly, the clientele didn't really change much in the pub. Except these days we call them things like bankers, lawyers, architects, and ladies of the night. For the Prospect of Wakefield, folks, well worth a visit. But again, just on our left-hand side, we've got one of the structures that I was talking about earlier. Now, believe it or not, London is actually still using its old Victorian sewage system. It was very, very well designed by a man called Sir Joseph Bazalgette. But back when he designed the Victoria sewer, there was only about 2 million people living in London at the time. These days there's well over 9 million people. And the old system, well, it just cannot cope with the sheer amount of waste that goes through it every single day. So that's all part of a multi-million-pound project to dig out a brand new super sewer, and they're going to plumb that into the old Victorian one. On your left-hand side, I know I've been talking about the left-hand side quite a bit, but that's the north side of the river, you see. That's where all the interesting things took place. But what you're looking at is the only private riverside garden here in the River Thames in London. All the other gardens that you've seen up until now have all been shared. All of that is one single property, folks. It includes the 2 warehouses just to the left. And that one does cost you about 15 million to own. But again, just on our left, we've got the entrance to the Lighthouse Marina. Just next to that is a red brick building that used to be the old dockmaster's house. These days, it is now a 5-star luxury restaurant owned by a very sweary mouth Scottish chef, Gordon Ramsay. Now the restaurant itself is called The Narrows, and Lighthouse DLR station would be the closest if you wish to go and pay it a visit. Now just coming up again to the left, we're going to see another riverside pub. This one's called The Grapes, and it has that wooden staircase leading down to the shore. Now they were going to sell that pub and convert it into more luxury apartments. But there was a local actor, a very famous actor, that was unhappy about the idea of losing his local pub. So he bought it himself, and to this day he's still the landlord. Now for certain legal reasons, I can't tell you who the owner is. But what I can say is that if you've seen the movie Lord of the Rings, you can go into that pub and behind the bar in a glass display box there are certain characters' wooden staff that was used in the movies. I wish I could tell you who it was, but he made it absolutely clear that we shall not pass on his information. So you have to work it out for yourselves, folks. Now coming up just on our left, we have the Canary Wharf Financial District. Now, the iconic building with the pointed roof and the flashing lights, that is known as 1 Canada Square. We call it this because it was founded by 2 Canadian brothers. It sits in the district that used to be Canary Wharf. The reason we call it this is because back when it was a working wharf, most of the cargo came from the Canary Islands. But it sits in the district that we now call the Isle of Dogs. Sadly, nobody knows why we call it this. I mean, it's not an island, it is a man-made peninsula. And some historians theorise this could be where King Henry VIII kept all of his hunting hounds. And that is pretty much the best we've got to go on for the time being. Now, there really isn't that much for you to see or do at Canary Wharf. There are a few shops, there are a few bars and restaurants, but it is all mainly for the office workers, if I'm honest. But what is a nice thing that you can do, and that is to take a walk from Canary Wharf along the North Shore right back up to Tower Bridge. It is like walking back in time, folks. You go past all those old converted warehouses, down the cobbled streets, you'll go past many, many riverside pubs, and many other pubs that are inland. They were just out of sight. You can set your imagination back to when those warehouses were in fully working order. At the end of each day, hundreds of men would have come piling out of those warehouses, and they would have gone straight into those pubs. Now, it was a bit of a problem back then because they weren't taking the paychecks back home to the wives to feed the families. But it wasn't really a concern for the government. They had bigger things on their minds, especially King Henry VIII's government. You see, not a lot of people wanted to join the Navy. Your life expectancy back then was very, very short. About 3 years on average for most people. So the government invented a very, very peculiar method for recruiting new members. Something they called press gang. What they would do is they would hang around those pubs, Lighthouse, Shadwell, and Wapping late at night. And if you came stumbling out of the pub and you were drunk and you were aged anything in between 16 to, well, 60, so any age really, they would creep up behind you, hit you on the back of the head with a large lump of wood, be knocked out. You'd then wake up, hopefully, several hours later, on board one of His Majesty's royal vessels, at least 5 miles off the coast of England. And there you go. Congratulations, you've just joined the Navy. Now, here's your payment. Now go get on with it. And that was a real method they used to recruit members into the Navy. That was called press gagging. Another method they used was they would actually go into the pubs undercover and they would spike they built for? I hear everyone asking in a silent way. Well, all of the dockers in Canary Wharf, of course, they were very much a working dock right until the 1960s, and then the containerisation came into play. What that meant was they built a massive container terminal downriver in a place called Tilbury. And what that meant was that no more ships had to come all the way up into the heart of London to unload their cargo. Put all those workers in those warehouses out of work. Hundreds of men lost their jobs in a very, very short time. It was quite a dark period in London for the London dockers. Now, despite the murky appearance of the River Thames water itself, believe it or not, this is actually one of the cleanest ex-commercial rivers in the entire world. The only reason that it looks the way it does is because it is a mud-based river. The tide on the Thames goes in and out twice a day. With all the other boats that you may have noticed bobbing across the top, it churns up that mud, which then floats to the top. That is what gives it its murky appearance. Now, if you were to get a pint glass, scoop up some of the Thames water, leave it for an hour or so, I assure you folks, all of that mud would settle to the bottom, and the water that you're left with on top would be crystal clear. It even says on the Thames Water website that you can drink the Thames water, and it will not kill you. It does say you may have the chew parts of it though, but at least you're not going to die, folks. Having said all of that, we do actually have over 125 different aquatic and marine life living alongside and in the Thames. This includes things like porpoise, seahorses, we even get a few seals. But you have to keep your eyes peeled. You never ever can tell when the seals are going to pop their heads up. But they have been seen as far upriver as far as Parliament. But we now have our destination in sight, the area of Greenwich. Now you may notice the three-masted sailing ship, the Cutty Sark, famous for being the fastest clipper of her time. As I'm sure you're all aware, we are very, very, very fond of our tea here in the UK, and there's always been a lot of competition to be the first boat back with your tea cargo, so that it would get you the best London trading prices. And the Cutty Sark, well, she's famous for being the fastest. Now beyond that, you've also got the two white domes of the Greenwich Naval College, just poking above the tree line. May look familiar to some of you. They were designed by Sir Christopher Wren, the same man that designed St Paul's Cathedral. You see, Christopher Wren had a bit of a practice down here in Greenwich before he built the main one in the city that took him 35 years. Now the Naval College is an open museum for you to go around and explore. Quite nice to go and explore the Naval College, but it can be quite daunting. You can get a bit lost if you walk around there not knowing what you should be looking for. So if you want a little bit of advice, if you're going to the Naval College, make sure you go into the painted gallery, folks, and take a look up at the immaculate painted ceiling. I think it does close around 5 o'clock, but as it is a Sunday, it may be sooner. I'm not too sure exactly on the times, I'm afraid. Now you've also got the antiques market here at Greenwich, and on the weekends we do have a coveted food market where you can sample all kinds of cuisine from all around the world. One of my favourites is just on this side of the Cutty Sark. You'll have a small food market, and there's a lady there that sells samosas, and they are the best samosas I've tasted in my life. If you would like something that is a bit of the eastern and western hemispheres. And this is the time zone that all other time zones around the world take their starting point from. Now the captain has come a little bit further downriver because we always like to give you the view of the Queen's House just in between. Lovely view of the Queen's House just in between the two Naval College, and in the distance at the top of the hill you have the Royal Observatory. Now on top of the observatory you can see a large hole with a bull at the bottom. Now that bull used to rise very slowly every day and it would drop at exactly 1 o'clock every day. And what you used to get was all the sea captains lining up along Island Gardens on the north side of the river with their nautical stopwatches, and they would be waiting for the ball to drop so they could set their timepieces before they went out to sea. And this is where we get the saying, keep your eye on the ball. When Christopher Wren came to build the Naval College, Queen Victoria, our reigning monarch at the time, I should say, made it absolutely clear that he could not block her view of the Island Gardens just on the other side of the river. So that is the only reason why the Naval College is split into two. But ladies and gents, we are now going to make our approach into the pier. I am sorry to say it does mark the end of this downriver journey. Now a little bit of safety and travel information for everyone on board. I'll quickly just mention to you, Greenwich is an old naval town, and that means there are over 30 different pubs for you to explore. So you can always have a lot of fun doing that. Now ladies and gents, this boat is scheduled to leave here exactly 3 o'clock. So this is roughly half an hour from now. Not really enough time to go and do all the things that I've just mentioned. Ladies and gents, there are many other boats that leave after us. There is one that leaves here at 10 to 4. And the last boat will leave here at 20 to 5 this afternoon. So a bit more time if you want to go and explore. You would not be wasting your time, folks. As we go alongside though, there may be a very, very slight bump. So just remain in your seats, or please hold on to the handrails as we go alongside. When you're leaving, take all your belongings with you, coats, cameras, bags and phones, anything that may spoil your afternoon if you leave it with me. Very finally folks, a little bit about the commentary today. For those of you that have been on board at the start of the journey, you know that I've been doing live commentary all the way down from Westminster. We do like to provide you with a live commentary, as it is a tradition for us who work on the River Thames. We are provided with audio guides that we can play, but we know that most of you come from very far away, and we want to make your day a little bit more enjoyable. If you have enjoyed the commentary today, and you would like to show any form of appreciation, well, you're more than welcome to, folks. As you're leaving the boat, I'll be at the exit gate helping everyone off, and by my side you may see my trusted silver bucket. If you care to throw anything inside of it, it is always appreciated, and it is of course faithfully advised. But we leave it down to you, ladies and gents. Once again, this is Greenwich Pier. Apart from myself, Sid, your captain today, all the staff working very hard downstairs. We hope that you enjoyed the cruise, and we hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thank you for listening, ladies and gents, and enjoy the rest of it.